Welcome to Twitter Talk Central, where in this video we are going to be not only starting a new series on the channel, we're also going to be talking about the new Mom's Basement podcast. So pretty much we're going to recap the new Mom's Basement podcast. So far, of course, there's only been 2 episodes. And yeah, pretty much this video isn't going to be like, criticizing the Mom's Basement podcast because I think it's quite cool. And Spotify's probably seen the potential in it as well. And that's probably why they've invested money to make this new Mom's Basement podcast exclusively on Spotify. So if you haven't checked them out, make sure you do. Just go to Spotify and search up Mom's Basement, and you could see all the podcasts. I guess it's important to stress as well that me recapping this podcast is kind of hard because it's just been 2 episodes, but I'll do my best. I think I might make this a consistent series on the channel where I just recap the podcast every 2 to 3 episodes. But I thought I'd recap the new Mom's Basement podcast by talking about the new guests. Of course, we have Keemstar and FaZe Banks. They have good chemistry. They've known each other for a really long time. As FaZe Banks says, "You're my homie. It's ride and die with you." And Keemstar has the same feeling back to FaZe Banks as well. They both support each other throughout the years, and they're really good friends. But one new addition to the Mom's Basement cast is actually Colossal. It's crazy. Who FaZe Banks? Their relationship with FaZe Banks is that FaZe Banks mentioned that he's a big fan of Colossal's Crazy's content. Of course, the few videos that he has up on his channel, FaZe Banks is a fan of it. And of course, Colossal is crazy. And Keemstar used to actually have their own podcast as well back in the day with the podcast called Debated. And this, of course, isn't actually the first podcast Keemstar has made. He's made numerous others, but I honestly think this will probably have the most potential in it, just because FaZe Banks and Keemstar are so big names that they could just attract whoever they want, like Mr. Beast, the biggest entertainer on the planet. But this is pretty much the cast of the new Mom's Basement podcast. So I guess we could just talk about the first and second episode and just recap Mom's Basement so far. Something important to mention as well before we go into the first 2 episodes of the podcast and before we analyze those 2 videos. It's important to say that and mention that Michael Buffer, who you guys probably may know who he is pretty much not the face of boxing, but like the voice of boxing. He's like the legendary commentator and really known for the catchphrase, "Let's get ready to rumble." And this has pretty much made Michael Buffer extremely famous as well. And Mom's Basement have actually had the ability or have had the chance to have Michael Buffer pretty much present the intro for Mom's Basement, which comes out every Wednesday. And for the past 2 weeks, it's actually been quite consistent. According to Logan Paul, who's got the Impulsive podcast, all the good episodes, or a podcast will last if it goes past 6 episodes. But one thing I do want to mention is if you guys want me to make this a regular series, I want to do it myself. I could, recap different podcasts like the Joe Rogan one, like the Impulsive one, like the Miniminter and Randolph one as well. There's probably many other podcasts I could review and recap as well. But in this video, we have Mom's Basement. Now let's actually get into the first 2 episodes. Now, their bio or about on Spotify says internet and gaming culture is exploding. Every week, the internet's most authentic voices, FaZe Banks, Killer Keemstar, and Colossal is Crazy, feature the hottest guests, topics, and tea. If you're into creator and gaming culture, you need to listen to this Spotify exclusive now. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Of course, this is a very informative bio. It talks about what they'll be doing on the show, who are involved in the show, and pretty much every episodes when all these episodes will be dropping. As you mentioned, it will be every Wednesday. It will be a weekly show as well. This bio and this about that was on their Spotify really just sums up the first episode of Mom's Basement. I mean, the first episode was kind of interesting and pretty much talked about the creators on it. Keemstar talking about him wanting to make a podcast and how, having Mom's Basement being something exclusive on Spotify has been in talk for a year, almost a year now. And that they wanted their first guest to actually be Ninja because he was extremely big a year ago. Um, but now they've actually changed it and that they want their first guest to be Mr. Beast. Of course, in the second episode, we get to know that it's actually going to be Mike Maljack, but Mr. Beast is going to feature very soon as well. One thing that we also get to learn on the first episode of the podcast is something that I mentioned kind of earlier, that FaZe Banks and Keemstar have been good friends pretty much against the whole Jake Paul allegation situation that happened. They've been known each other for 5 years now, especially during the time that FaZe Banks also went through a tough time in his life. During the 2016-15 time, Keemstar was there for him. And yeah, FaZe Banks has also supported Keemstar, which he refers to as his homie and his ride to die. Now, as I mentioned earlier as well, Keemstar and Colossal is Crazy have also had a close relationship. They often have the same perspective when it comes to Twitter to drama and just drama in general. And they've also had a podcast together as well, so they have the chemistry. But the two people that may not have the best chemistry is actually Ricky FaZe Banks, or Colossal is Crazy. They've not really, talked too much before. FaZe Banks did mention though in the first episode that they are close. They're not close. Sorry, FaZe Banks actually enjoys Colossal is Crazy's video, even though it's been like a year since his last video. One thing we also get to mention though is that Colossal is Crazy. Pretty much what was kind of interesting and a little bit humoristic was FaZe Bank mentioned that they've upgraded their studio, they've spent a lot of money, invested in a lot of money into the show, and that they're going to be doing it weekly. I mean, Keemstar has to fly from the East Coast, like he lives in Buffalo, New York, to Los Angeles, where FaZe Banks lives, and they got to spend a lot of money on that, and just these different things. Therefore, they had a little bit of didn't have that much money left over, so another host had to be Colossal is Crazy. This obviously, of course, was a joke. I found it funny. The people on the cast as well laughed at it as well. But we get to also later know that Colossal is Crazy also makes the least money from this podcast, and that it barely makes any money. The paychecks and the percentage of money that goes to each other is different. Of course, that is understandable as well. I mean, FaZe Banks and Keemstar, are top level entertainers, while Colossal is Crazy is pretty much, he probably could be a top tier entertainer. He's just extremely inconsistent. But to be fair, in the first episode, the podcast gave off good vibes, at least for me and many other people thought it was, a good podcast, the start of something new, the start of something great. But one thing that I found a little, I guess, interesting, or what I found that might possibly ruin the podcast, is that Keemstar, I love Keemstar, to be fair. I find many people hate him. I find him entertaining, and I find that he has a lot of valid points. And even though he might sometimes be in the wrong, he still has extremely valid points to get out of that wrong situation and make the situation right, which I respect that. And he's pretty much, he loves to bully people. He said it himself, and he's pretty much known for doing that as well. Ricky Banks, though, he's extremely chill guy. He's chill. He loves people. Doesn't really like to hate. He's not really about the life of cloud. He's a typical family man. But Colossal is Crazy is pretty much very similar to Keemstar. He's on the rant guy. I love to bully kids and stuff like that. Not kids, but bully people over the internet and stuff like that, and find it funny. Now, I don't think this is exactly the best combination to have, and that will kind of bring us to the next episode of Mama's Basement, which many people found really bad. They found it a fail, and it was kind of, I wouldn't call it a scandal, but Colossal is Crazy took out to Twitter to respond to this of him being extremely censored massively. The second podcast, they had Mike Maljack on, which I assume everyone here knows who Mike Maljack is. If you don't know, he's pretty much he's part of Logan Paul's PR team, and he is a close friend of Logan and also FaZe Banks as well. Now, the problem with having Colossal is Crazy and Killer Keemstar together is they're both really anti-Pauls. They're against, Jake and Logan Paul. So really, this episode of the podcast really came out as those two trying to gang up um, on Mike, and it kind of built a very negative atmosphere. I mean, I'm gonna make another video just going through that episode and just talking about the episode itself and why it was a mess. But anyways, pretty much I feel like the reason why Impulsive is working so well and that they're on 170 episodes is because they had three really different guests. Logan is really, calm, chilled, but he could also get very enthusiastic. Mike is pretty much really enthusiastic, and Spencer is not feminine, but like really just down to earth. There was a very negative atmosphere on the second episode of Mom's Basement, which people took out to respond to this on Twitter. And of course, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. The podcast could still become an extremely big success and extremely consistent, even if it has negative energy, because, a podcast doesn't often have to be chill. But, and I really do hope I am proven wrong on this, but I don't think Colossal is Crazy will make it further in the different episodes. I think he will be cut. But yet again, I thought so with Mike Maljack, who first was on Impulsive. People told him he should get cut, and he proved everyone wrong, and he's a huge entertainer now. He went from being micro-influencer to being a proper influencer. So hopefully Colossal is Crazy will prove me wrong, but this was pretty much my recap on episode 1 and episode 2 of Mom's Basement. I will also be making a video on why Mom's Basement episode 2 was a massive fail. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.